Good evening. Welcome to Reflections on East Granby. My name is Mike Malloy, and I'll be your host this evening. Our guest tonight is Thomas F. Howard, a 73-year-old resident of Old County Road in East Granby. He's lived in East Granby since 1976, 36-year resident, and it's a pleasure having you here on our show tonight.
It's nice to see you, Mike. Thank you.
Good to see you, too. Okay, you were on before, and we ran on quite a ways, and it ended up being a show that was over an hour. So we're redoing it so we can fit you into our time slot, and it's the first time we've actually re-interviewed somebody. It was quite a while ago, so it was interesting to see if there'd be any change or what.
Well, I thought we were going to run a segment, 2 or 3 segments, a series, you know.
We may. Let's see how it goes tonight. Anyway, so you were born where, Tom? We'll start
in Hartford.
Okay.
We lived in Hartford at that time, and for the next 19 years I was in Hartford.
Okay.
And then moved, like so many people, to the suburbs.
Right.
And went to Plainville and lived there for about 2 years before I got married and came up to Windsor Locks.
What are your first memories of Hartford? What are your early childhood memories of your hometown?
The Rocks.
The Rocks.
That is west of Trinity College, is in a section sometimes called Frog Hollow.
Okay.
At least the area to the south,
Right.
to the north of where we live. But the Rocks were the Rocks west of Trinity College, and it was known as the area of the Rocks.
Right.
Okay. Anyhow, we were on Harbison Avenue, and it was a great area to grow up in. It was friendly neighborhoods and a lot of parks, especially as I got older.
Right.
Played baseball. I mean, we played in the streets, but, you know, we'd put it through the windows, you know, and then my dad was always never mad at me, but he had a lot of windows to replace.
Yeah. Well, okay,
But we had parks like Pope Park and Colts Park and all over, within easy walking distance.
Right.
And the parks, to me, were one of the, and movie theaters, were 2 of the most important parts of my life as I was growing up as a young boy.
Right. That's what your life revolved around, huh?
It really did. I mean, it was school and baseball.
Okay.
By and large, for the summertime.
So you grew up, what age did you stay in Hartford till?
Well, after graduating from Hartford Public, I went to Central Connecticut State. It was Teachers College of Connecticut at the time. And in '57, we were able to get enough money together for my mom and dad to have a house, to get a house in Plainville.
Okay.
And so we moved. That is, I was the last child in the house. All my 3 brothers and my twin sister all were married by that time.
Right.
And so we moved to Plainville, and from there I commuted to Central, or Teachers College.
So you went through your whole schooling in Hartford?
Yes.
What schools did you attend?
Moyle and Wilson were my elementary schools.
Okay.
Wilson was the, like from first grade to 4th, and then 5th, 6th, and 7th. Well, no,
Okay.
something like that. 5th grade, until 5th grade at Wilson, and then it was 6th, 7th, and 8th at Moylan.
Was it a fairly mixed neighborhood? Was it what was the ethnicity there?
Well, that's a good question. It wasn't as diverse as it is today.
Okay.
With a great many Hispanic people, families who are still going to the same church I went through, St. Lawrence O'Toole's Church, and also black families. I don't know how many of the original families were there, but we had Italians, Polish, and at least every European variety that I could think of.
Okay.
I know them because I delivered newspapers, the Hartford Times, to them. So did my brothers and my sister.
Right.
So we got to know quite a few families on Harbison Avenue and Glendale and Hamilton Street.
What did your parents do?
They were factory workers.
Okay.
My dad worked in the Arrow, Hart, and Hegeman as a foreman for assembly switches. That is, the ladies that he was supervising assembled these circuit breakers, small ones. Okay. It's like switches on the wall. And he worked there all of his life, just about all of his life, from the time he married my mom in the 20s. He was born in 1900. So about 1924 to the time he retired in like 1963.
Okay.
Where he had emphysema and he had to retire early. Right. But he was a hard worker at Arrow, and he could walk. to Capitol Avenue from
What did
our
they
house.
What did they actually make? What was their end product there?
Switches.
Switches.
The kind of switches for the wall, but the kind that he worked on seemed to be multiple switching, meaning each turn turned something off
Most
or
people-
on.
yeah, most-
5 or 6 different varieties.
So, but most people don't understand or have any memory of the diversity of manufacturing that existed in Hartford and all the big cities. There was
especially
multiple
Capitol Avenue.
Okay.
Capitol Avenue produced guns as well as rubber tires,
Right.
as well as switches. I mean, it was really quite a diverse economic base.
When
in
did that
Hartford.
change? After the war? Or?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not certain. Certainly, it was there during World War I. World War II, by that time, things were changing. I think there was the need for different plants, more technology, and I think it was the beginning of the move to the suburbs.
Okay. So, and a lot of that manufacturing just left. I mean, it's gone to different countries, but it hung in there until
But
the
at
60s.
that time, a lot of them went out to the suburbs,
Okay.
in my view.
And in the 60s and 70s, that were still hanging on.
Oh, yeah.
But, okay. So, what any other school memories, school day memories that you wanted to share?
Oh,
Anything?
sure. I loved school. I loved the social part of school and the sports and things like that. And I think I got a good education. I'm not sure that I had the best pre-education in the sense that I didn't see a lot of books around my house.
Okay.
I saw comic books.
Right.
And my first reading of the classics was reading classic comics.
Okay.
But it did affect me in terms of my interest in history.
Right.
And then, of course, growing up and improving my reading skills and, speed, and it took a while.
Yeah.
But going through Hartford Public High School, I think we got a good education there. But I still needed to sharpen my basic skills.
Okay. So but in terms of enjoyment, it was a good time. I mean,
Very good time.
Yeah.
I was very social in high school and call it political. I was president of the student council,
Okay.
and so I was a leader in Hartford Public. And among the 3 schools, we had a city council, and I was on that and did some things that were useful for sports. As a matter of fact, Dillon Stadium was where the city schools played, and eventually became a source for professional football.
Yeah, that became quite a venue.
But that press box that's up there, I helped to bring about because I interviewed people on parks and the reporters and so on, and they were freezing their butts off at these games. There was no heating or insulation, and we put a proposal together for the city council. That is the young people from the city council, and they put up a new press box.
Oh, good for you.
So I felt pretty good about that.
Yeah, you get the taste for that sort of success at a young age, and it really carries over.
Yes.
You value you think you can do anything.
That's right.
You think it's it's important, and I think young people get involved and do stuff like that.
My brother was a help there. My older brother. I had 3 brothers, all older, of course.
Okay.
The second brother was Robert, and he was sort of my mentor in that way. He was on junior city council, so whatever he could do, I could do.
Right.
So we started where he left off, and not just to compete with him, but to he set a standard that I
You tend to follow in the footpath of your siblings.
Of course, I couldn't follow his athleticism. He was a off-state guard in football.
Yeah.
I went to cross country and track.
Okay. It's because you were running away from him.
I was running away from him on that score. Yeah.
So anyway, so you went to you graduated from Hartford Public.
Yes.
And where'd you go from there?
I went to Teachers College of Connecticut, now Central Connecticut State University. At that time, it was not very big. I mean, there was no off-campus. There was no college dorms for men. And it was only off-campus housing that you could rent. And the graduating class was smaller than my high school graduating class at Hartford Public. Obviously now, I think in recent years they've graduated 4,000 people.
Central has become quite a complex there.
It's
I'm
huge.
Very impressed walking through there. I mean, it's really, they've done a heck of a job.
It is. It is something else.
you come into, it's almost like you leave you leave the country for a while. It's like
Well, you do. I mean, you look at the buildings, you go through the buildings, and there's Mallinger Hall. Well, I knew him. He was my gym teacher.
Okay, yeah.
Right. It's like so many things as you get older, and as I taught in Suffield, we had some kids from the city who were Project Concern kids, and I would bring some home if they were in the track team and it was kind of late and they didn't have their ride, and we'd go by Quirk Middle School and Fox Middle School, and I'm telling them about Tom Quirk, who was my high school principal at Hartford Public. You knew Mr. Quirk. So this separation, the kids and what they knew, and seeing a name on a school, that must be Lincoln's time,
it's ancient history.
And here I knew them.
Yeah.
Mr. Fox, we used to be over his house for fellowship meetings on Sunday to discuss, problems that kids have at our age as teenagers.
You were a connection to their past for them. Yeah, that's great.
It was a shock to them.
Yeah. So you went to Central. You get a 4-year degree there? Is that what?
Yes. Bachelor of Science degree and a teaching certificate to teach social studies and history.
Okay.
And we were fortunate enough at that time, with the demand for teachers. You may remember in the 60s, they were hiring 25 teachers every year.
Well, the baby boomers were all going into school.
The schools were crying. There were more and more schools were needed, and more teachers and staff.
They were building a school a year in Enfield or places like that.
Yes, exactly.
Crazy, yeah.
And so the superintendents would come to the teacher prep schools, sign up, and when I saw Suffield, I signed up for it because as part of my experience in a geography class, we used Suffield as a laboratory. We went out to Suffield, and Virginia and I,
so you were familiar with
we were familiar with the school, and that is with the school district and the history and so on. So when the superintendent came along with the principal, I was able to drop names on them, the historian, and Mrs. Clark and Mrs. whatever, and and tell them about the uniqueness of their community and something that maybe they didn't even know.
Yeah, that's impressive in a young applicant.
It separated the 10 or so who went for the interview, and what made it happen was they wanted to teach. They wanted to put a local history program into the schools. Okay. So I already won.
So you already had one.
I had an inside track on it. But they were also looking to expand the athletic program. Okay. Because they only had basketball, baseball, and soccer. Right. In different seasons. And they wanted to expand it and have a track and cross country.
So you brought two things to the table.
So I brought in a willingness to serve. Right. And that allowed them to improve their program.
Now, where in this did you meet Virginia, or Ginny?
Well, Ginny was at Central. She went to school in New Britain, and she turned up in the sociology class that I was in. Okay. It was for freshmen and sophomores, and I was a sophomore, and here was this lovely freshman. Yep. And I happened to sit next to her, and as they said, the rest is history.
The rest is history. It's only happened a couple billion times in the planet.
That's right.
All right. So you have so you had met Ginny, and did you guys start dating and meet fairly soon and get together?
It was very unassuming and nothing serious because we were so young, and I was the one that needed to grow up. She went through in 4 years. Right. I needed to get away. After a year and a half, I was not sure that I wanted to do what I was doing. Right. And so I went to work. I did that twice. I came back for a semester, still wasn't sure, and I worked in GE for a year in Plainville.
So you were dating Ginny through this period?
Yeah.
What did she think about you dropping out and getting a job?
She was...
I'm curious.
She really didn't... You weren't express a concern about us because we still stayed in touch. But you'll have to talk to her about her own
Yeah. No,
fears,
I know her, so that's why I asked. I'm curious if she
She'd
was.
be a good one to interview too.
She had an opinion.
Because she's been far busier in terms of elective office than I was.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep bugging her.
She was on planning and zoning. She was on the board of education.
Right.
And she was register of voters for many years. So she put in 20 years of service herself.
Right. So you had so you graduate from you get the job in Suffield. Where did Ginny go at that point?
Well, she got a job. Keep in mind, she graduated a year ahead of me, even though I started a year ahead of her, because I was going out and taking evening courses until I realized what I really wanted to do. And so by my junior year, she was a year ahead of me. She was a senior. And by then I was accepted into my department. I was getting serious about jobs and teaching. And she got a job in Cheshire. But we decided to get married before my senior year.
So she's in Cheshire. You get a job in Suffield.
But I'm living. No, I didn't get the job.
Hartford.
I was in Plainville at that time.
Okay.
So I commuted to Plainville, from Plainville to New Britain, and she went down to Cheshire from Plainville.
She got a job before you.
Yes, she did. And it turned out we had one car, the same car we went on our honeymoon with, which was a 47 Plymouth. Well, it had to go to Cheshire and back to Plainville to New Britain and back to Cheshire to pick her up in Plainville.
Right.
Well, it blew a rod somewhere in between us,
Okay, yeah.
So we got another car, but she finished the year in Cheshire, and I finished my work in Central and got my degree.
Okay.
And then got hired by April or May. They gave me the job.
Okay.
And so it was a matter of going through the summertime. We left home and found a place up in Windsor Locks, rented an apartment. But that was a tough time for us. That was a time she and I lived on a penny. That usually catches somebody's attention.
Yeah, no, I'm paying attention.
Yeah, I know you are.
Yeah,
I know. But I've mentioned this to people I was giving a talk to.
Yeah.
A penny. We tell our grandchildren this.
I thought you were using it as a phrase. But
no, this was true.
Yeah, okay.
This was true.
Okay.
My first check is not going to come in until mid-September, and we started at the 1st of September or something like that. And so over the summer, we had no checks coming in.
Right.
All right. So it's getting to mid-July, and we're looking for coins in our coin boxes and so on.
Trying to buy some bread.
Well, exactly. And I said, well, okay. My dad, God bless him, he knew I collected Canadian coins.
Right.
So he'd go through his pennies, and he'd give me any Indian coin. In the old days, there were Indian pennies among those. Yeah. And so he'd give me the Indian pennies and the Canadian pennies, okay? Right. And I'd put them in my book. So it came time, hey, we needed to get some groceries, and we had no money.
Okay.
So I went to the book and checked the values, called the coin man. He says, well, I can't buy it. I'm not really in the market for it, but I know somebody who might be interested.
Okay.
He called me. He came from Enfield, gave me $7.50 for the coin.
Oh, wow.
That was enough at that time to buy, 3 pounds for $1, Hamburg, and all these other things.
You were able to fill up the refrigerator for a couple days.
We had enough for 2 weeks.
Oh, no. Really?
Or more. I mean, it was easy.
That's a short story in itself.
But it's a true one.
Yeah,
And thanks, we thank my dad every time we had food on the table. And it was just the two of us, So.
Right. So that was...
fortuitous moment.
Adventurous times.
Yes.
You were living. It's a young couple.
Yeah.
So, this is the 50s, right? This is the late 50s.
No, the 60s.
The 60s.
Yeah, we got married in 61.
Okay.
And I got hired in 62, in May of 62, and started in September.
Okay.
And
so now Jenny's in Cheshire.
She had left the Cheshire job and got a job up in Windsor Locks.
Okay.
By that time. So she's in town in Windsor Locks, and we're renting a house in Windsor Locks.
Okay.
And I'm going to Suffield as a rookie teacher.
So you in that era, I mean, there was so much influx of the young teachers that it had to have been a pretty unique time. I mean, it's rare that you have that many young new teachers. It's usually much more of a diverse
We had 25.
cross section, you know.
Yeah, and we all retired about the same time.
Well, that would
Yeah, I mean, it was no surprise.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You know, after 33 years, I retired. Some lasted a couple more years, but the uniqueness was the fact that all of us, or a large proportion of us, remained in that school for our whole professional career.
And that was
Well, from 62.
which school?
Suffield High School.
Okay,
excuse me.
okay,
Yeah, Suffield High School, and all different subjects.
Okay.
And we became the coaches. We became the advisors to the various classes over the years. I think I had 6 classes every 4 years, because you know there's more to school than simply the curriculum.
Right.
I mean, you hope they get the best, and we give them the best. But it's the social that's part of the school, the sports, it's the extra opportunities.
That's what they remember for the
enrich
rest of their
them.
lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, the social fabric. Yeah.
And teachers have to be there to supervise the proms or
Right.
to be a class advisor.
Right.
And so we were. And there was good chemistry in
Right.
those years between the teachers.
Yeah, I mean, you're setting the guideposts, which everything works within.
And we had great kids too.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember every class I had, and if I'm looking through the class yearbooks and I have them all, you know, they all come back. They all come back.
Lots of memories.
And there were some interesting stories just this last weekend. Ken Seymour passed away. He's one of the old timers in town.
Yep.
Okay. And friends of his were also friends of mine. And
No, was he, just before we go, he was a brother of, now who did they name the Seymour School after?
it would be another Seymour.
Different branch of the same family? Or is
No, it's a branch of that family.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Ken was more associated with Newgate Newgate Prison.
Okay.
His father was the proprietor of the prison, or the supervisor of the prison.
For the state, or he owned it?
No, for his brothers.
Okay.
The 3 brothers formed a historic corporation.
Okay.
And bought the prison from the previous owner.
Okay.
And the state bought it from them.
Okay, so they actually established almost a historical site, and the state just stepped in and bought it.
They did, and they
Wow,
used
that's pretty unique.
They used a stagecoach as a prop, just
Yeah.
as the previous owner did. And of
Right.
course, as you know, I've taken an interest in that stage, and we've had
Yeah.
it rebuilt and so on. And it's part of the exhibits now of the East Granby
It's
Historical
beautiful,
Society.
yeah.
Oh, everybody should see it. Take a
Yeah.
ride in it.
Yeah. So getting back to you said that you were at his wake and you were.
Yes, and in that wake, one of the people speaking on behalf of Kenny and was a first cousin. She was in my first graduating class.
Really?
She was in the Clubs of Democracy that I had for my first semester
In Suffield?
in Suffield.
Wow, that's great.
And she and my wife, as they went through life, exchanged positions. My wife took care of my kids, our kids.
Right.
And she took my wife's position.
In Windsor Locks? That's
It reversed as our kids got older. Virginia took her job when she was taking care of her children.
Oh, no kidding.
And it
That's
wasn't
funny.
something that was planned.
No, it
just
just worked out.
So they became very close
Yeah.
to us. But her daughter was in my last graduating class.
Oh, small world. Yeah.
You know, it's kind of neat. And anyhow, it was a personal reflection time for me.
Yeah. So when you came to town in 1976, the bicentennial.
Yeah.
That was really the time in East Granby where a lot of people started, not just East Granby but around the country, really reflecting on history again.
Yes.
I mean, it seemed like there was a lot of. I had a sticker in my house in East Granby that said Historical Societies, 1976. They started it. Does that sound?
That's about
accurate?
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Ethel Wilson and that's Charlie Underlack and his wife and a few others Nancy Moody, who's now the president this year.
Okay.
She'd be a good one to talk to, by the way. Anyhow, the Historical Society has done a lot of good things to preserve history recently. But they weren't in existence at a time when the Stagecoach could have come to us. It went up to Suffield in place.
Okay.
Because they had a historical society.
But that was kind of a renaissance in history, or focus on history. That whole I think just everybody watching the recreations and stuff like that must have set some sparks in people.
Oh yeah, and the focus on the founding fathers and whatever. There was a lot of federal money that went into schools too. It turned out I wrote a project that got a grant that encouraged the use of primary sources with students as one of the ways to increase their interest in history, to do work with research rather than take this and memorize it type
Then
of
by rote to actually explore.
That's right. To problem solve. Well, here are facts from different things. What does this mean to you?
What would an example of that be as the way you applied it in the classroom?
Well, I use census, the federal census.
Okay.
That happened to be on microfilm.
Fascinating.
And we were able to use the census. I would tell the kids, okay, get a name. And say, where? Well, haven't you seen some of the signs on the houses on the streets?
Right.
You know, that's built by so-and-so.
Remington, Spencer.
Visit the cemetery, pick a stone, you know.
Yeah.
And so they would come back. I said, well, some are on Sheldon Street. Well, which Sheldon is after Sheldon?
Right.
You know,
right.
Trying to get them aware that around them are these cues.
Right.
You know, there was something happened here.
Yeah.
What do I know about it?
Yeah.
Nothing. Find out.
Start to awaken history. Yeah.
And so as soon as you had a name and you try to well, what time period is this? Okay. Well, let's see if they're in the census. And there they are, and there's something about them. Okay, now you got something. How old are they? Do you think they were old enough to go into a war? Well, which war was at that time?
Right.
You know,
It's
not World War II in 75, you know.
Right.
So they have to begin to use the information in a logical way. And that doesn't always come natural. I mean, time for many young people is a flat screen. It has no depth.
I always refer to it as what you want to do is establish a diorama.
Well, you do.
Instead of a picture.
Yeah.
You know.
Life is a three-dimensional.
Yeah.
You know.
And
at least.
So much of that is crucial, because if you don't understand that, then you don't understand your place today. That you know, one of the things that always comes back to me is the fact that, you know, there was always such a focus on slavery and how much, in some ways, that's almost like a yoke that people have to carry today.
Yes.
You know, and it's unfair, because slavery's existed forever, and it was certainly. I'm not taking anything away from the legacy of it in this country, which was primarily African American. But there was nothing unique about African.
It was also Native American.
Right, but there was nothing unique about that in Europe, in the Middle East, in most of the world. There's been
most
slavery,
of Africa.
And they shouldn't feel like there was anything different about them, other than the fact that they were the unfortunate group at that time.
Right. Right. But the sins of our fathers is always being used as a pay me something now for it, and
it's a
but
template.
we forget the context in which slavery occurred, and I'm doing research right now. You'd be interested in this, on my grandmother's family, Stantons.
Okay.
Most of my roots are from Ireland. Okay, my grandfather was born in County Tyrone, but the woman he married was Old Yankee, going back to 1637, and Thomas Stanton. We have a reunion coming up soon, and I promised them to do the personality of Thomas Stanton in 1637.
You're going to do a
No, not a reenactment.
Oh, I was going to say that would be fun. Yeah.
Oh, no, mercy, no.
Yeah.
That's about the only word that I found in his writing that gave a sound context.
That you could actually.
And I thought of, Treasure Island, and the captain who has one eye, and and peg leg and Marcy,
Yeah.
But doing this research has made me more aware of 17th century records, and there were a lot of them.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, there was the Pequot War and there was King Philip's War. Both were very disastrous, but especially for the Native Americans. And if they didn't execute, as Indians tended to do, execute to remove the problem of prisoners, they sent them to the West Indies. Or they made them prisoners of other tribes and the Connecticut River towns.
Really? Yeah.
In other words, they became slaves.
Right.
All right. And so you can go through just about any will at that time, and these are the founding fathers of thousands of people today. And they're giving their servant to their wife or to their son, or
Right.
So this is property.
Right.
This is, it's in their appraisals and so on of the inventory that they have. So
it's funny
we forget that these founding fathers were part of their culture, part of their whatever. You know, I want to know about the warts. Honestly, I want my people to be human.
Right.
I don't want them to be evil.
Yeah.
But if you get a horse thief in the family, I think that probably brings us down from the pedestal we tend to put people on.
You know what? The phrase I always like to use when people get a little too highfalutin is in everybody's history, in everybody's family history, there's kings and there's slaves. Yeah. So if you look far enough, you're going to find examples of every. So don't get too arrogant about.
House of Lords is 2 generations from the other class.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And that, you know why I think that's important historically is because I think there's a tendency in a society where there is upward mobility to forget that very quickly.
Definitely.
And I always say
you think you're better than everybody else.
The first thing somebody who climbs a ladder does is pull the ladder up behind them oftentimes.
Yeah.
And that's something they need to be reminded of. And how corrosive that is to society.
And to the whole culture.
And how un-American.
That's right. The more people who rise up, the more people. If you're talking about manufacturing, you want everybody to buy your product.
Right.
Now, if you don't allow your people to have enough money to buy the product, it doesn't help your business.
That's a good point. Yeah.
You know, you really need to have enough of this movement.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to try to get back into your life here because we're going to talk about history for the rest of the hour. It's easy to do.
Well, remember when we started.
We're going to have to do 10 episodes. But yeah. Anyway, to get back to, so you're teaching in Suffield, Ginny's and Windsor Locks. When was the first time you came to East Granby? What is your memory of that?
That's a good question. We rented for a few years, and then we were able to put in on North Main Street in Windsor Locks.
In Windsor Locks, okay.
Because we couldn't afford it. We paid $75 a month, and it was delightful. I mean, it was a 2-story, second and third floor.
It's in the 60s.
It'd be in the 60s.
Mid-60s,
that's right.
Yeah.
And it's great family. Right. We were part of their family. You know, it was good. We did the painting of the house for 1 month. You know, whatever. And then we raised enough money so that we could put a down payment once they credited Ginny's income. In those days, they didn't credit a woman's income.
As part of a mortgage?
As qualifying for the mortgage.
Really?
We got turned down for the first one.
Oh, God.
Because you take mine and you take how much, you can't pay more than 20% of
They figure she's going to be pregnant and not working.
Exactly. And it turned out to be unconstitutional.
Oh,
and
God.
So, but that allowed us, once they did, we were able to buy a $15,000 home.
Yeah.
In Windsor Locks.
Yeah.
And it was a nice place to bring up children. Yeah. And we had our 2 children to bring up. And
their names?
Stephen and Karen.
Okay.
And they're delightful, and went through the local school systems.
Now you're in Windsor Locks at this point.
Yeah, they're going to Windsor Locks.
Okay.
And Ginny is still teaching in Windsor Locks, and
right.
I stay in Suffield for 33 years. And there were times, however, when I was fortunate enough to get sabbaticals almost every 7 years. I believed in the Israeli system, where every 7 years you went back to school, become more stimulated or more learn something more.
Right.
And it was good for me to do that.
Do they still do that in teaching?
Well, it depends on the economy. If they don't have money to pay half a salary or something like that, they can't do it. But it's one of those things.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that could keep your faculty intellectually young and stimulated. Okay, and so that helped me because I was able to learn get a new degree and introduce sociology and courses like that into the curriculum. I was able to do, during this bicentennial year, all of this work with Suffield's primary sources and introduce diaries and account books and census records into the curriculum. And it became, in that case, in Suffield history, it became the most popular elective in Suffield.
Okay.
Kids liked it. Why? Because it wasn't me lecturing all the time.
Well, there's a lot of repetition in history that's taught in school. You go over a lot of historical. So you just brought something
Here's the
completely
book
new. Yeah.
on Suffield history, which parallels U.S. history.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
But what I wanted them to do is get into documents.
Right.
Take anybody, take a name. If they lived in Suffield and had ancestors there, fine, take your ancestors.
Right.
Do genealogy. But the whole idea is to rebuild a life from documents.
Right.
To do that, they have to read them. They have to take what's in them that enriches, brings facts out, and those facts have to now be followed up. Okay. Even to the point of saying, well, what's their timeline? Well, they're so-and-so age. Well, when were they born? Now they have to do some math.
Right.
Okay, and then let's see, when's the likely time that they're going to be dead?
Right.
How do I know? Think about it.
Give a expected life.
Exactly. And so they begin to say, okay, well, then I could expect a grave or a death record, within 20 years.
Well, you were teaching logical extrapolation.
Exactly.
I mean, that's another tool they can.
And I tell you, death was a highly motivating subject for some of these kids.
Yeah.
I had two girls in particular who, in the traditional classes, were not that excited. They did it, but they weren't excited. They took this Suffield history class. They were up at the town hall after school 5, 6, 7 times for 2 or 3 weeks. Why? Because they wanted to know, and it's one of the subjects. I said, how about what people died of?
Right.
So they went through all the death records, extracting the causes of death for the 19th century.
It's fascinating even to
and they loved it.
I can remember doing that as a kid in the Hazardville Cemetery.
Yes.
And looking at the gravestones from the Hazard gun factory and seeing
yes.
the people, all the people that had blown up.
The explosions, that's
or
right.
the little kids drowned in the river.
Yes.
Kids died very young.
But it asks questions. It
makes it living.
Because they didn't teach them swimming.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And how the young woman died. Well, because birth was a costly thing for women.
Dying in childbirth was a very common way to go.
Not to mention smallpox.
Or the children dying before 2 years old. The statistic I read once was that in the Revolutionary War era, if you made it to 4 years old, you were very likely to live to 80.
And that's probably true.
But your mortality in those first 2 or whatever years it was horrible.
All these childhood diseases.
So you were living in Windsor Locks, and what inspired the move?
Well, Ginny's kids grew up. When I say her kids, her students.
Okay.
She was teaching middle school kids,
okay.
and all the kids around the neighborhood became her kids.
Okay.
And we were in a ranch, had no trees. It was a sand pit.
Yep.
It used to be tobacco field, and there was very little privacy.
What street in Windsor?
It was on Smalley Road, which interconnects Springs and North. And cars raced down. We lost a dog, to a car driver. And so the privacy, the kids are getting older. We wanted trees. We wanted to also give Jenny an opportunity for privacy. She could still teach these kids, but adolescents didn't know how to handle their teacher in shorts.
Oh yeah. You want to have your private life.
We had a swimming pool, then it just couldn't.
You want to disconnect.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we began to look for a place to go, and we were very active in the JCs in Windsor Locks. I was president of the JC men, and she was the president of the wives, and we got to know the people in towns around us, because after 35 we graduated. You're not a JC anymore. So we
What are you?
Well, you're a senator if you're lucky. If you were a leader, you became a senator.
A senator of the JCs.
Of the JCs,
Okay.
but it was more an honorific. But I became a state officer for a couple of years. That allowed me to stay on, and I represented towns around Windsor Locks, like Granby and East Granby, and Avon, and Heartland and Suffield.
Right.
And so I got involved with those men who were the presidents and their programs and so on, encouraged them to get recognition from other chapters and so on. And I got to know the people in those towns and who were great. And East Granby was unique because it's a small town, but they were doing so much for their community.
Yeah.
And so
who were some of the names of the people you
Charlie Purser was the president.
Okay.
But other men aren't around anymore. They've left town, but they were, as I went through the town list of boards and commissions, the wives or some key people were on the Board of Finance and whatever. They helped to organize Metacomet and Higley villages by getting federal grant and to create these entities. So they were very much aware of what were the problems and the needs of a community, and did their homework to learn how to get it done.
So you were impressed with the...
I was impressed with them.
So did you come here at some point and look?
Oh, yes.
So you started looking for a house in East
We looked in East Heartland first and put a bid on a house, but they didn't accept it. But we then looked in Granby. You know, we had a realtor take us around to about 12 houses. He finally got tired and said, I can't show you anymore. Yeah. But I have this one from the newspaper that you might want to give him a call.
Right.
Well, we called him, and next thing you know, we put a down payment on it, and that is made an offer, and he was thrilled, and we moved in within a few weeks.
Okay. So you moved it. Was it a new development or was it a house that had been?
No, it was an older one. He was the second owner of the house. It was on Old County Road, which was Melody Acres. It was part of the Crow farm way back. The Crows were Danish folks who came in before World War I and were dairy farmers. They lived in West Hartford, and then they came up to when this land was available, and they bought the farm, and they had all the acreage across Spoonville Road, as well as the hill to the west of Spoonville Road, and they had dairy cows as well as crops to feed them. They had a silo there, and of course corn and whatever. So they were very prominent in the agricultural community.
So in the 50s, they sold some of it and developed it.
Well, the old man died. Theodore Crow died, and so the estate had to be, or was it? It must have been when the wife died too. The mother of the estate was divided.
And some of it was divided.
Yeah, one of the heirs was Godrickson. That is through one of the daughters, and so. I guess to make ends meet, they sold a portion of it. I think the grandmother was still alive. That is, the mother was still alive. I had heard that from Lenny Crow. And anyhow, the part to the south of Melody Acres, where we are, and across the street, the lower portion, were sold for development.
Okay, so it's a building boom after the war.
Right,
and that was happening everywhere.
Yeah, and they kept that last farm. And when we moved into the house, our neighbors were cows.
Oh, really?
I
so you were
loved
right
them.
at the end.
I talked to them all the time.
That's before they built the upper section.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And it was still owned by the Crow family. And from the cows, after they were sold, we had corn.
Okay.
And it was when it was bought by
so it was very rural. You moved
Tobacco Realty bought it, and
so you were at a dead end. So everything was right to the left of you, or right.
It was beautiful. I mean, we loved our neighbors to the north, especially the cows.
So you came to East Granby in '76. So you moved here, and what were some of the first things you got involved with in town?
The Democratic Town Committee.
Okay,
because the Don Holtman. Was the attorney for the sellers.
Oh, okay.
And so when he saw our car at the seller's house,
do you have
it
a
had
Carter
stickers.
Sticker or
something?
He grabbed it.
So he got me on the town committee in 30 days. You know?
Okay, yeah. But
there's another story because he didn't know it at the time, but Peg Smith was the district representative to the state committee from East Granby.
Okay.
She's the one that held the Democratic Town Committee together, and she learned that we were active in politics in Windsor Locks, that we had worked in Con O'Leary's campaigns and Allegrassel, and we were at Ella's house, as a matter of fact, for a fundraiser for Con, when Con brought over this little lady, a short lady, by the name of Peg Smith.
No kidding.
She was secretary of the East Granby Town Committee.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
For the next hour, she wouldn't let me go.
It's a fairly small area, so I find just in my travels around, you get to know the players pretty quickly. So you know who's
She was a nice lady. But as soon as I got on, she left. So I think she'd been waiting to go someplace else. You know,
she was waiting for relief.
Yeah, I think so.
That can happen. So
she did her,
you got on the
she
town.
did her work.
You got on the town committee. You're still teaching in Suffield.
Yes.
And what else did you do at that point? Well, you were on several boards and commissions.
The Economic Development Commission is
Okay.
probably the first thing I got on. Because with that commission, you get to know what's going on.
Right.
Because you hear the reports from the different boards, or you know what's happening in business.
Where the movement is.
Yeah, where the movement is, right. And so that was helpful. And you also get the reports from the selectmen and as to what boards need people.
Okay.
And so you're trying to find people for various boards and commissions.
So you were on the EDC. Had you become chairman of the or
For
secretary?
a couple of years, it was pretty much. I won't mention the names, but the Republicans had a majority. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't up for grabs.
No, I'm talking about the chairman, not on EDC, but were you chairman of the Democratic Town Committee at that point?
I was chairman of that committee for 4 years.
Okay.
After about a year and a half after arriving in town.
So this is the late 70s.
Yes,
Okay.
into the 80s.
All right.
And then I got away from it and came back another 10 years, whatever, for 4 years.
So you did that for a span. You did EDC. What else?
The Board of Finance I was on for a couple of years.
Okay.
And then it was a matter of, I had an opportunity to do a sabbatical again, my third sabbatical at Trinity College. So I took advantage of that to do graduate work.
And subsequently, you've been on the Land Trust. You've been.
Well, I didn't get into the Land Trust until Charlie Purser caught me out outside of St. Bernard's one time, mentioning how the Land Trust is really in a very low point, in its history. They're not doing much. They don't have essentially leadership was tired, and so we called a meeting, and in a week we had 14 members of a board, new board, and it started a very active board, and I was president for 4.5 years, but since then we've had 3 presidents who all served 4 years, and we've done some great things, especially with youth, and brought some young women aboard with their families, and they want to do more with the library and all kinds of creative stuff.
It's kind of reaching out through the
it's fantastic.
So you're also pretty involved with the Historical Society.
Well, I was in the Historical Society, just like with the town committee.
Yeah.
You can only take it for so long. I never get into a group to serve for life. I always find my successor early. With the Historical Society, it was 4 years, and then I'm out of here. Good people, but.
Well, I think every group has its personality.
My style is moving forward.
Sometimes
some things are not movable.
Sometimes the bulldog knocks doors down. You know what I mean?
History is preservation.
Yeah.
And that's the inspiration.
Right.
And so we did it for 4 years twice. And the most recent period was probably the most challenging, because there were things we had hoped we were going to accomplish in terms of historic preservation of the Veets House, for example, that didn't come out.
Right.
And but yet, coming out of it has been the historic barn over there at East Granby Farms, and the preservation of Oach and other good things. And we've had some good presidents. Bill Westervelt just finished, and
Right.
Nancy Moody, who was on the board with me in my first 4-year term, is
Okay.
now president.
Any other groups that you were involved with that you want to mention quickly?
No, those are the big ones. You know, my wife and I are both maybe old-fashioned, old school. We like to come home and, you know,
Relax.
put up the moat and,
Yeah.
you know, circle the wagons and relax.
Unwind.
And it's very difficult once I'm in there to
Okay, I'm
pick
gonna
up
add-
and go out. And
I'm going to
do
ask you
those
some
things.
boilerplate questions now.
Okay.
What are the biggest changes in towns from 1976 to 2012?
Well, suburbia certainly started before that.
Right.
But the developments, we have more and more, you know, McMansions and more people. Some of it has been good because the school that was created in 1962, our high school, which I was thrilled to see and have been proud of ever since, had only like a graduating class of 50 kids. Now it's getting up there to the point where, what is it, 100?
It goes up and down.
You know, it goes up
Yeah.
and down.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
one family comes in, is, you know, it does make a difference.
Yeah.
But the more kids that you do have, the more options you can bring to a curriculum.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah, diversity is
but the
key.
diversity of the teachers is interesting because they're multiply trained. That is, you need people who are cross-trained as art as well as history or English and whatever.
So the biggest change, just to kind of paraphrase, is the kind of suburbanification. I don't know, it's a new word. But
along that line.
and the development of the secondary education in town.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that was a very big thing because my kids, when we brought them, went through the high school, and they got an excellent education,
Right.
both of them, and they were different types of students, and they needed different training.
It was small enough that they could cater to both of them.
Oh, my daughter got caught up in Victorian literature because she had a teacher that really was exceptional.
That's great. So if you could change something about the town, is there anything, if you had Tom's magic wand and you could do one thing for the town, independent of cost or maintenance or whatever, what would
That's a hard one because the changes that, you know, to
Can't all
continue
be
your
easy.
previous question, you know, Route 20 has really decimated
Right.
The town, but the airport dominates the town
Right.
too, and both affect quality of life to some degree, both for jobs but also for noise and traffic.
But what would you change? Is there anything you think the town lacks that you'd like to see it have?
I'd like to see a more centralized center.
Town
I
center.
mean, we lack cohesiveness as
Yeah.
a town. We always has, though, historically.
It's tough.
The ridge divides east and west. The roads divide us. I mean, our church doesn't unite us. We're not all Congregationalists or Methodists, and those are the only two churches in town. Catholics go to 4 different towns.
Right.
Tariffville, you know, Windsor, Suffield, Granby.
Right.
And that's true for Jews or other denominations. They have to go to other towns.
Yeah.
And the schools, as a point, in 62, was one of the first things that was unifying. The elementaries helped, but early on they were in separate districts, the Falls and, you know, different districts. But the high school was for everybody in town. I mentioned Ken Seymour passing away. He went to Simsbury High School.
Yeah.
You talk to anybody over 60,
They all went to
they went to different schools.
Simsbury or Granby or Suffield. Right?
Exactly. So they didn't have that unifying pull that a high school can bring to a community.
I'm going to close with our last question, which is if you were to give advice to a young person growing up today, what would that be?
Keep learning.
Education.
Keep learning. And it's not necessarily formal education.
Right.
It's training.
Right.
It's learn what you don't know.
Okay.
Because what you don't know can hurt you.
Right.
You can lose the job because you haven't learned it.
Right.
Okay? That you might have wanted. You got to be better because of what you're doing. So you got to learn from your experiences. Keep learning.
Yeah, I you know, just a quick comment. the diversity of your education is immensely important. And I think, to get stuck in just the protocol of like your normal high school education is a disservice to yourself. And also, it doesn't sell as well.
That's right.
You really have, you got to think of yourself almost as a product. And the more you bring to the table, the better.
The Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, joining other groups, volunteering with civic groups,
huge,
and doing this and this and this, and being able to say, yeah, I experienced what it was like to be out there with Phragmites and cutting this invasive species.
Right.
Well, that's going to separate you from most of the kids.
Exactly. That's
but
huge.
Here's a guy interested in the environment.
Right.
And so.
Well, Thomas, thank you for coming on once again.
My pleasure,
It's been a pleasure
Michael.
having you here tonight, and I would like to thank our guests for joining us once again and viewing yet another interview in our series of Senior Reflections. And you can view our show every Friday night at 8 p.m. on GCTV, Channel 16, or pull it up online at www.gctv16.org. And we thank you once again. Today's date, which I failed to mention at the beginning of the show, is June 29th, 2012. So those of you watching this 100 years from now can look at the calendar and see what was going on then. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike.
Tom.